Hello everyone and welcome to Hotspot, brought to you by University Television Productions. I'm your host Ty Hawkins and today we'll be discussing whether or not marijuana should be legalized. Joining me today are 3 students from Boise State University, 2 that represent why marijuana should be legalized and 1 representing why marijuana shouldn't. Typically on Hotspot we have 2 people representing each side of the argument. However, that isn't the case today. Let's go ahead and meet our panel for this afternoon.
I'm Sean Trippishin. I'm a junior and I am studying criminal justice.
I'm Brad Peterson. I am a junior as well, and I am a social work major.
I'm Samuel Wanacott, and I'm a junior studying economics.
Well, thank you everyone for being with us this afternoon here at UTP. We'll go ahead and start with this question. It's going to be to both parties. Why do you think marijuana should remain illegal?
Well, for me, one of the biggest issues is that I believe that there's that fine line between the free economy and government control. And I think that if marijuana were to be legalized for recreational use, that there would be significant repercussions, if you will, on our children, others' children. And I think when it comes to, the children in this country, there shouldn't be compromise. And I think that's one of my big points for why it should remain illegal.
Now we've got 2 of you. Let's go ahead and go over to Brad. What do you think about that?
Why it should remain illegal?
Yeah, or why you think it should be legal?
Why I think it should be legal. Well, kind of in response to your point, Sean, just my experiences, I grew up in a pretty middle to upper class neighborhood, and I didn't start using marijuana for, until I was 17. And I've been clean for 2 years now, and I can talk at lengths about that, but for me, it wasn't a matter of like if I could get it or where. I knew the kids to get it from, and I knew how to get it once I wanted to. And I mean, regardless of whether the government's controlling it or not, I knew how to get it. So I mean, why not regulate it and make money off of it, as far as I'm concerned?
Sure.
Fair enough.
How about for you, Sean? Sam, pardon me.
My argument is basically that prohibition has not worked. Ever since it was prohibited at the federal level in 1971, marijuana has remained as prevalent then, or is as prevalent now as it was then, if not more so. We're spending boatloads of money making it, or fighting or combating legal marijuana use, and I think that it hasn't worked, and I think there are better ways that we could go about dealing with that.
And with that said, thank you. I want to know, is this a practical issue or is this a political issue to you guys?
Well, I suppose it's not quite so easy to disentangle those two.
Okay.
It is a practical issue, I think. Like I said, we're spending a tremendous amount of money not fighting something ineffectively. It's not working. There are other problems associated with that, which I'm sure we'll get into. So, yeah, it's a practical issue. It's also a political issue because, well, right now it's politicized and it's illegal per government edict. So.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yeah, I think it's both, and okay. I think that's pretty much what you were saying, if I'm correct. And yeah, I mean, I think on a practical side, there's immediate effects on the people that use it, the people that are around them, are affected as well. And then I think politically, like you're saying, spending money fighting, combating this illegal sale or what have you of this drug. And, I think that it's a tough argument because, as we all know, politicians would like to get reelected. And I think that is a very tough sell to the majority, which, to be frank, that could be how the system works, is, what do the majority feel? And the majority in a democracy would supersede what the minority would feel. So yeah, I think it would be a tough sell politically, and then, yeah, like you said, practically, there's some issues as well.
How about for you, Brad?
The whole reason I'm here is because I think it's practical. I don't want to get caught up in the political argument at all, just for my sake. But, I work a 12-step program, and I guess through my own experience too, I mean, it's public record. You can find my documents on the repository here in Ada County. But I have had impact just for the very fact that I smoke marijuana, and that my life has taken a turn for the point where I can't find jobs now and stuff like that just because of a criminal record that's all related to marijuana usage here in the state of Idaho. So I guess it's just practical for me because I have to look at the ideals of a country, kind of, not just get into the political argument, but like really, is it hurting people? Is it not hurting people? I don't know, that's up for debate, but that's all I have.
Okay, and I want to mention this. Mason Vert, the campaign co-director for the Colorado-based campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol, says federal officials have made it abundantly clear that they do not enforce federal marijuana laws unless the situation involves the cultivation or distribution of extremely large quantities of marijuana. Do you think if marijuana is legalized, it's something that could open jobs, we can be prosperous to it, money can be made off of this?
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear that there is a demand for marijuana. No matter where you stand on that, whether you're for it or against it, there is a demand for marijuana. And as we've seen recently with the Colorado and Washington, they have taken that first step to regulating it in a level-headed and hopefully reasonable manner. And they expect, I think they've already brought in tax dollars from the sale and cultivation of marijuana. There are dispensaries popping up, left and right. So yeah, I mean, it's I think abundantly clear that this is going to help the economy, help state and local governments with revenue, and provide jobs.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah, can't argue with that. It is something that would definitely create jobs. Can't argue the fact that money would be generated. For me, and I think that there's a cost that could come with that from a moral standpoint. And to expand on that, it's, where do you draw that line? It's a lot of people, including myself, feel that using drugs in general is morally wrong. And so, it's like, well, if we legalize this, it's like, okay, since when did money become the standpoint for, well, if you can make money off it, let's just legalize it? It's like, okay, well, if you can make money off of meth, should we legalize that? What if you could make money off of murder? Would you legalize that? Probably not. It's like, where do you draw that line is my issue with that. And I think the line in the sand should stay the same with marijuana.
Do you guys have anything to respond to that?
I'll respond to that. In my own experience, I've met people who can smoke marijuana, quote unquote, recreationally, and it's not a problem for them. They can put it down right afterwards. Me personally, I fall into the category of what you're talking about. I spend every dollar I have on it. I will steal people's money for it. And I mean, if I had children at the time, of course, I would neglect them and I neglect family members. So according to me, this is just the problem. It's on a much deeper level. Like, I just see a drug as alcohol is the same equivalent. And, regardless if it was legal or not, it's still the person who's consuming it. If it's causing them to have these problems in their life, like it was me, then they need to do something about it. And I can understand your point, why, but at the same time, I don't think it's the drug and the alcohol that is the problem. I believe the person, and it's mentioned by the health department federally that it's a disease that we have, more so the addiction and the alcoholism. And I believe that's really the problem at the end of the day, not so much the fact that it's weed or alcohol, but that's just what I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But I would also sort of turn the tables and ask, and look at what we're doing about it right now. So you want that line on the sand to be drawn, which is fine. Let's draw that line. But right now, marijuana is readily available. So like I said, prohibition is not working. And it's funny that we're having this conversation in 2014, but we have a certain experience, a historical episode in our country in which we saw quite clearly and almost viscerally how prohibition failed. Of course, we're talking about alcohol prohibition. It was a dismal failure. The only people who benefited from it were the mobsters. And in fact, today, it seems like the only people who are benefiting from it are, you've got the cartels, you've got gangs, and in many cases, you've got local police departments who benefit from asset forfeiture laws, which basically allow them to just take people's property if they're suspected of violating those federal laws. So the status quo for me is not an argument. I would like to see some measured approach to actually eliminating or vastly reducing the availability of marijuana, which has not happened.
If I could,
Yeah, absolutely, please.
I think that, yeah, I mean, definitely respect that point. I think that as whether you look at politicians, police forces, federal law enforcement agencies, DEA, I think that by showing that, yes, criminals benefit, they're selling, distributing, using, by society standing up and saying, we will do our very best to show we won't tolerate this behavior, because I look at the system for what it is. Right now, it is illegal. So fine, then put your resources towards, and we've done that in various different ways to say, we're not going to tolerate this behavior. This is how we're going to fight it. They write the laws out. They go out and enforce the laws to some extent. And that's as far as I take that, is you just take the system for what it is and then show that we're not going to tolerate this behavior and then go out and do it. But
what do you guys think about that?
I think that's kind of sidestepping the question.
How so?
Well, I think that when Nixon began the war on drugs, the point was, there's a point of any war is, or I guess ostensibly should be, to eliminate or vastly reduce the availability of drugs. Today, like I said before, marijuana is incredibly prevalent. It is everywhere. Anyone can get it, and it doesn't take much. I mean that goes for other drugs as well. I mean, and right now, because of the war on drugs, we've got the largest prison population in the world, both as a percentage of our population and in raw numbers. We are locking people up and spending. I mean, since 1971, we've spent collectively over $1 trillion trying to combat marijuana and other drugs. And so, yeah, I think it's not working. We're spending a lot of money, wasting a lot of resources, and so I think the ball is in the court of those who are in favor of keeping it illegal. How are we going to make this work? How are we going to make prohibition work? Because right now, the costs are exorbitant, and the benefits don't seem that clear.
With that said, I wanted to talk to you about, have you mentioned something that we discussed a little bit before? It's illegal. People have a decision. Sure. Elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, looking at the prison, the prison population side, there's the argument for those who are in favor of legalization, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you could argue that, look, the justice system is ruining these people's lives. We're picking these people up for possession, they get sentenced, they're in for X amount of years. My response to that would be, look, if you're so worried about your life being, destroyed by the system, it's like, then it's very simple to just go, well, then I'm not going to smoke marijuana. And you shared some of your experiences, Brad, and I'm sure, perhaps maybe you had regrets or not. I mean, that's not really my place to say, but where you could have been like, well, I wish I wasn't in this spot.
Is it that simple, Brad?
Well, it really comes down, the reason it's a disease and it's classified as such is I'll explain it like this. Like I said, somebody normal can pick it up and put it down if the consequences are there and say they're going to get a divorce with their wife or lose their children. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the entire reason it's a disease. The fact is, for people who are addicts or alcoholics, like myself, I was on probation for 2 years, and regardless of the fact that I was on probation, and I see this all the time, regardless of the fact that I have these consequences glaring me in the face, I'm still unable to stop smoking pot and still unable to stop using other drugs or drinking alcohol, whatever your choice is. And it really is that simple in my experience with what I see on a daily basis, trying to reach out and help these people just through my own experience and what I've been given freely. But yeah, I mean, that's really just my response to that.
And I'd like to move on, if we can, to this, and we'll start with you on this particular question, if we can, Brad, and I'd like all three of you to chime in, please. Do you think marijuana is a gateway drug, Brad?
I thought you guys would bring this question up. It's a relevant question to me. I mean, you could say in my experience, yeah, that was the first drug he did because he knew that that was the one where he knew how to get it. But, you know, again, going back to my argument, as soon as I smoked pot for the first time, you know, I was hooked. And it wasn't, within a year I was using all these other drugs that I had no intention of using. So if you want to argue that it's a gateway drug, I can't say that it's not, but at the same time, I don't think somebody who's normal and doesn't have a disease is going to say, well, I'm just going to smoke pot. I'm not going to go use acid, do meth, and do cocaine and heroin while I'm at it. But of course, if my disease, all of those things become options as you just start to progress. But that's just my response.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a hackneyed argument because the fact is that I think the majority of marijuana users don't go on to consume harder drugs.
Do you think they've experimented with those harder drugs other than just consuming marijuana?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think the statistics would necessarily bear that out.
Okay.
I mean, the question of whether or not it's a gateway drug, I think, is, you know, for some people, as Brad mentioned, the addictive qualities might lead them to try harder things. But I think for the majority of people, marijuana is something that is not even in the same realm as something like heroin or meth. And you know, I would imagine that for most people who started smoking marijuana, maybe they started smoking cigarettes before that. And was it cigarettes that led them to then smoke marijuana or to drink alcohol and then from there move on? I mean, I think it's a really individualized thing, and I'm not sure you can broadly state that it's classified as a gateway drug.
Yeah, okay. Sean?
I think ultimately my answer is I do believe that, it can be a gateway drug. And just a personal experience is in criminal justice professor here, and her research has shown that, I forget the exact percentage, I don't have it with me, but is that a large number of hard drug users did say that they began their drug using career, if you will, on marijuana. And I think, and we also had talked about this before, is I think that it's safe to say that people that have used marijuana used for the first time when they were young, whether, you know, early teen years, late teens. I think it's easy to go in a social setting where, ooh, you know, I tried this. What's that white powder stuff? You know, it was easy to try the marijuana. Why would, you know, I think it could be very easy to go to the next thing and think, hey, no big deal. These are young kids. And I think that these kids, like, truly need, like, you know, help, like, get into a program or what have you. And so, yes, ultimately, I do believe that marijuana is a gateway drug. I think it can lead to worse activity.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, as I stated already, I mean, I can't refute the evidence that, I mean, in my own experiences attest to, like, the fact that marijuana is my first drug, but at the same time, I mean, I was smoking cigarettes, like you said before. I smoked marijuana, and I had plenty of times that I could have drank before I smoked marijuana. You know, for me, it's really as simple as the fact that I just have a disease, and I've seen people who it hasn't been marijuana, it has been drinking, and it has just led them in. Once they've tried that and they've just started to consume that, whatever that is, it becomes their next obsession. And then I've seen people who can do it and just put it down. And I mean, there's a lot more people like that who can just put it down because they realize the consequences are getting bad. And I mean, to me, that's the whole point of this argument, is we wouldn't even be discussing if it's illegal or why it should be illegal if there weren't consequences that followed, like there were with smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol. And I mean, we're not even going to go into that. But I mean, there are all these other things that don't cause as severe consequences. So if there weren't consequences, I don't know. I wouldn't see the argument.
Anything to add to that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, with respect to the consequences part, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's arguing that legalizing marijuana wouldn't have certain costs. I'm an economics major, and we talk about costs and benefits a lot. So there are always costs. The question is, compared to what? Right now, you know, the same people who are legally the same people who aren't supposed to be able to smoke marijuana are able to smoke marijuana. And, you know, whether it was legal or not, there, as Brad said, I mean, there are people who are going to mess up their lives because they are too reliant on marijuana. But that's the same thing with alcohol, and it's the same thing with many things. I mean, there are, you know, World of Warcraft players who abandon their families because they're too addicted to World of Warcraft. So, I mean, the question, I mean, you can get addicted to anything, and yes, there, you know, certain goods have more addictive qualities to them than other things, but it's a matter of degree, and I think there needs to be some personal responsibility that comes into play.
Just one quick thing to
yeah.
add on to what you said. I think that you brought up a great point, is you can get addicted to a lot of things. And so with that being said, I think that society, at least at one point in time, has dubbed marijuana as something that should be illegal and dubbed other things as things that can be legal, even though there are addictive properties in these substances. So like I said before, it's like I just take the system for what it is now. And, I think at one point it was decided that this is something that should be put under control, and it hasn't moved on from that, because I think maybe the majority still feel this way.
Go ahead.
Well, I think so. The majority, from polls that I've seen, don't feel this way anymore. In fact, I think it's something over 50 to 53% of adults think that, or at least find that prohibition is not working. Now, those ideas about marijuana are changing, especially with the millennial generation. You said that we decided that marijuana should be illegal, but it's funny that back in the 30s, I think it was in the 30s that the first at least state law was passed to regulate marijuana. Maybe it was federal. Anyways, there was a lot of propaganda and misinformation that surrounded that. I mean, you can think of Reefer Madness, which basically portrayed pot smokers as murderers and crazy, hooligans and whatnot. So as time went on, people saw that argument was not, it didn't really match up with reality. And so then they went to the argument that, well, pot smokers, they'll ruin their lives and their futures, they'll end up living in their parents' basement, et cetera, et cetera. That was 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm sure we've all seen the school ads and so forth. And now that there have been a large portion of the population that has smoked marijuana at least once, and I think people are realizing that there was, the propaganda on the part of the federal government and police agencies just was not matching up with reality. It's not most people's experience with it.
Do you have anything to add to that, Sean?
No, I think I definitely respect your opinion.
Well, with what you just said, I want to talk about a Washington Post article by Hans Breiter, who writes for the Northwestern University Science Online. And apparently the Journal of Neuroscience says even casual marijuana smokers showed significant abnormalities in two vital brain regions important in motivation and emotion. People, us, think a little recreational use shouldn't cause a problem if someone is doing okay with work or school, he said. Our data says this is not the case. How can you argue that?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of ambiguity in the scientific research right now. The fact that it has been illegal has largely impeded the ability of science to study these things. Everyone can point to the studies that show that, well, long-term effects actually they don't seem to be any. Some studies show that, yeah, there are long-term effects. It would not surprise me if that research were totally accurate. I mean, and I don't think that would change my argument. Again, there's a certain amount of personal responsibility that comes into this. And as a free society, well, an ostensibly free society that has the largest prison population in the world, I think we can allow people to, make those decisions for themselves.
Brad, you speak a lot of personal experience, and we thank you for that.
Oh,
how has it affected you, and how do you think it can affect other people with their work or school, or how their thought processes are?
Well, I know for me personally, I can't refute, like Sam said, any of that information because I don't have anything to back it up with. I can just talk experience, and I know that my grades suffered when I was smoking pot. I know that I had no personal responsibility either. So, I mean, it all goes back to that, for me at least. I was driven. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I was driven to just smoke pot over doing other things. That's just how I see it. Not that I chose to get bad grades, not that I chose to, rip off my family who's paying for my education or other things like that and blow off homework. I mean, I wanted to get good grades and stuff, but there was something fundamentally inside of me that was driving me to constantly use. Every morning I got up, smoke throughout the day, and just continue to live like that for years, and then thank goodness I quit. That's why.
Before we get ready to wrap up the show, is there any closing arguments or anything you guys would like to add to the discussion?
I think if I could quickly just talk about what you're saying, I think that you in your words, you said you had a disease at one point.
Oh, I still do, yes.
And I think that making marijuana legal, making it readily available, I mean, you guys argue that it's readily available now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the programs that help addicts, even alcoholics, you know, but specifically with drug addicts, I think you would see, at least from, you know, you would see some of those helpful programs for people that are struggling start to phase out. I think you go, well, it's legal. Why, you know, we may not have to focus on helping these people that truly had a problem with it.
Do you want me to reply first?
No, sure, go ahead.
You know, the problem is never going to go away as far as I'm concerned, because it's not so much whether or not it's illegal, it's the stuff that it does to the family that is really surrounding it and the people that love the person who's using it, and in my case, is addicted to it, whether it be alcohol or whatever. I mean, those programs have a purpose and they're always going to be there, hopefully, just because there's always going to be children's hearts that are going to be ripped out and other things. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's illegal or not as far as like, am I going to jail or whatnot. It's those people who suffer, who are innocent in the whole matter that concern me.
But I think as well, you could argue if it were illegal and you were, you know, jammed up for a possession charge or what, you know, something like that, a good judge, maybe not all judges would go, you know, maybe this is a person that just needs some help. I can connect you to these resources versus I'm just going to go to the dispensary, buy my product, you know, you don't go through any system
That's
where
trying to force
help
you to
could be
get help.
available.
Yeah, I understand that.
Sam, do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that the experience of alcohol prohibition, I think, and subsequent legalization shows that those programs will not fade away. They are there now, and we have programs to help addicts of all kinds. And I think that, you know, what do we do with people who have diseases? We help them, we rehabilitate them. We don't lock them in jail. And I think that's the most cruel and inhumane part of all of this.
We'd like to thank our guests for joining us today on Hotspot. Today's show will wrap up the spring semester, but next fall we'll be back with more discussions of the important topics going on at Boise State University. If you have an opinion or would like to be on the show, please contact us at boisestate.utp@boisestate.edu or follow us on Facebook and Twitter by searching Boise State UTP. For everyone behind the scenes here at UTP, I'm Ty Hawkins, and thanks for joining us today.